Then, of course, there's the time that the Doctor got a crash course in the nightmare world of 21st century capitalism, and the ensuing hellscape that it creates for the medical field. The Doctor is stolen from Voyager and forced to work in a backwards hospital. Starting out on level red, where things look grim. Patients are dying everywhere, and there's no resources available to help them. But then, he ends up getting transferred to level blue, where he's told the need for his services is far greater. The Doctor goes up to level blue, expecting to find conditions that are somehow even worse than what he just experienced on level red. But the reality is far worse than that. Conditions on level blue are perfect. Clean facilities, plenty of resources, and preventative care, so no one even gets to the point of being critically sick. So why the discrepancy? Well, because the computer that rules them has created an algorithm to determine the level of care, not based on the need of the patient, but rather how valuable the patient is to society. Or rather, by how valuable they are perceived to be by an unfeeling AI that doesn't understand nuance. For instance, according to the computer, an architect is far more valuable than a sanitation worker.
Why are these patients getting preferential treatment?
They have a higher TC than the others. Treatment coefficient. It determines the level of care they receive.
How is this coefficient derived?
Through a complex formula that involves profession, skills, accomplishments.
How is any of that relevant to medical treatment?
An agricultural engineer is obviously more important than a waste processor.
Really? That's what you think? Well, let's see if you change your mind when your cooling fans are clogged up with trash.
Investment bankers make more money than auto mechanics, and we justify this by saying that investment bankers require more specialized knowledge. But do they? They don't have to diagnose complex engine failures, or master constantly evolving automotive computer systems, or navigate precise mechanical specifications, or spend years training on detailed technical manuals just to keep vehicles safe and functional. We reward work that's economically productive, but then dismiss work that entails caregiving, service, or art, despite those things being pretty important for everyone.
So yeah, put into 21st century terms, the patients on level blue are simply richer. Architects are not more valuable than sanitation workers, but in the 21st century, they are certainly paid more than sanitation workers. Why? Well, it's an artificial system designed to create a hierarchy. And it's the same thing here. When the Doctor saves the life of one small boy by altering his treatment coefficient,
we can amend his database to include additional skills.
He realizes that it doesn't even matter. He's from a lower class, and as such, he will only ever be able to go into his family's line of work. He will never be of enough value to the system to make it to level blue. Meritocracy is a smokescreen. What this society has done is to recreate capitalism without money. But his future in this society doesn't even matter, because the system straight up murders him.
Locate patient R12.
Patient R12 has been transferred to level white.
What's level white?
It's the morgue.
For the crime of taking more than his allotted medicine. And not just him, either. Other patients have their medicine cut off as well, in order to make up the deficits of the Doctor's actions. But even if the Doctor's attempt to save this one boy had succeeded, it would not have been enough. This entire system needs to be torn down. A furious doctor calls out the head physician of the murder ward as the monster he is.
The patient had exceeded his medication allotment. It seems someone had given him unauthorized injections.
And said murderhead actually has the nerve to call out the doctor's ethics for stealing medication.
Don't you have any ethical standards?
You are hardly in a position to speak to me of ethics. Lying, stealing. Any other crimes you wish to confess?
The doctor retorts that Fuckface may as well just put a phaser to his patients' heads. To which Fuckface replies, "We're doctors, not murderers."
Why don't you just put a phaser to their heads?
We're healers, not killers.
No, you are murderers. And so, being left with no other option, the doctor kidnaps Fuckweasel and injects him with a very treatable illness. All it will take to save his life is the medication that's abundant on level blue, but here on level red, it's artificially unavailable. Thus, he will be forced to change the rules if he is to survive.
I order you to medicate me now.
Ordinarily I would, but if the allocator says no...
Because when dealing with a betach like this, the only way to force them to do the right thing is to make it affect them personally. They do not care otherwise.
Is this some sort of revenge?
Not revenge. Leverage. I want enough cytoglobin to cure every infected patient on this level.
And it fucking works, too. Because this worm values his own miserable skin above all else. When the doctor makes it back to Voyager, he asks Seven to do a diagnostic of his ethical subroutine.
I'd like you to give me a checkup.
Program appears to be operating within normal parameters.
No problems with my ethical subroutines?
None.
I see.
And she assures him that it is functioning perfectly. Now, I hope I have made it perfectly clear throughout this section just what this episode is about. But just in case, allow me to be abundantly and explicitly clear. This episode is not, as right-wing grifters would have you believe, a cautionary tale about the dangers of universal health care. I started to wonder why I had been so opposed to government-mandated universal health care. Almost every Western country in the world has universal insurance of some kind, except the USA. Here in Canada, everyone was covered. If they worked full-time, if they worked part-time, or if they were homeless and lived on the street, they were all entitled to the same level of care if they had a medical need. People actually went in for routine checkups and caught many of their illnesses early, before they were too advanced to treat. People were free to quit a job they hated, or even start their own business without fear of losing their medical coverage. In fact, the only real complaint I heard about universal health care from the Canadians themselves was that sometimes there could be a wait time before a particular medical service could be provided. But even that didn't seem to be that bad to me. In the States, most people had to wait for medical care, or even be denied based on their coverage. Depending on where one lived and how rural the area was, one's access to care could be limited, and that was regardless of what country one lived in. The only people guaranteed immediate and full service in the USA were those with the best, and most expensive, health coverage, or wads of cash they could blow. In Canada, the wait times were usually short and applied to everyone regardless of wealth. If you were discontent with the wait times, and had the money to cover it, you could always travel out of the country to some place where you could demand a particular service for a price. Personally, I never experienced excessive wait times. I was accepted for maternity care within a few days or weeks. I was able to find a family care provider nearby easily and quickly. And when a child needed to be brought in for a health concern, I was always able to get an appointment within that week. This is a condemnation of America's capitalist healthcare system. Level Red is not Canada's system, set in contrast to America's Level Blue. Both Level Red and Level Blue are thoroughly American. You may have heard it said that the rest of the world's healthcare is so backwards that anyone with the means will travel to the US for care. The truth is, that the US system is only the best for those with means. Yes, rich people from other countries will travel here for care because by paying the absurdly high price tag, they get preferential treatments. Putting it in terms of the episode, and using the aforementioned example of Canada, being dissatisfied with Canada's one-size-fits-all level green, rich people will travel to the States to get preferential top-dollar treatment on level blue. Level blue, which can only exist in contrast to the artificially created level red. Instead of sharing resources fairly and equitably, as on level green, level blue hoards far more resources than it needs, or indeed can ever use, leaving level red, which sees far more patients, with next to nothing. There is no reason for it to be like this. I would say that America's healthcare system is fundamentally broken, except that it is functioning exactly as intended. This is not a system created by well-meaning idiots. It is a system created with malice for the sole purpose of making the rich richer at the expense of the poor. The American system does not need fixing. It needs to be torn down. This is the system that left us so hopelessly unprepared for the COVID-19 pandemic. After all, if level red is already the nightmare world that we saw in the episode, how much thinner are resources going to be stretched in an emergency situation? This is where the real horror begins. And now, if you have made it this far into this section, I am going to put a second content warning just for this next source. I learned to deal with double the work and fewer resources. I learned how to run in between two hallways and make split-second decisions about where my time was needed most. I learned to look at multiple critical patients and give my opinion about which should receive a higher level of care first. I learned how to judge who was most likely to die first. I learned to judge people based on their age, mental state, and medical comorbidities. I learned to prioritize the people most likely to make a full recovery. I learned to advocate for hospice and palliative care. I learned to tell families over the phone that there is no hope. I learned people's favorite music and set up Bluetooth speakers in their rooms, so at least they wouldn't die in complete silence, even if they did die alone. I learned to fully gown up in under 15 seconds. I learned to run into rooms with no regard for my safety. I learned what PPE I was willing to bother putting on. I learned how to work 15-hour days without breaks to eat or drink or use the restroom. I learned to work through my own physical and mental discomforts. I learned to stop questioning why my heart would race every time I entered the building. I learned to ignore my own hunger and thirst cues until they became unrecognizable even on my days off. I learned to stop parking in the parking garage because the urge to jump off the top floor quickly became all too alluring. I learned to ignore my own pain and just deal with bleeding through my socks every day because of an infected toe. I learned to stop calling for help because there was none to be found. I learned to suppress my humanity and simply carry on. I learned to zip body bags, fill out toe tags, and keep one singular moment of silence before clearing out the room for the next person in need. I learned to reuse single-use equipment until it would physically fall apart, and even then, we would sometimes staple it back together. I learned to share the funny moments and laugh at the horror of it all. This is why I curse that doctor's name in multiple languages. And I don't even know what his name is, nor do I care. He is Fuckweasel the Ptah, and nothing more.